fall on today over that open letter signed by 47 GOP senators to Iran's leaders on the ongoing nuclear negotiations. Some Democrats blasting the letter, saying it not only undermines the president's efforts to reach an agreement, it also damages the possibility of any bipartisan approach to the issue. Secretary of State John Kerry just weighed in. He's testifying on the Hill in front of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Here's what he had to say.
The president has made it absolutely clear they will not get a nuclear weapon. Now, the presumption by a lot of people up on the Hill here has been that we somehow aren't aware of that goal, even as we negotiate that goal. Our negotiation is calculated to make sure they can't get a nuclear weapon. And it's really almost insulting that the presumption here is that we're going to negotiate something that allows them to get a nuclear weapon.
Joining us now, Ray Takei, Senior Fellow for Middle Eastern Studies at the Council of Foreign Relations, former Senior Advisor on Iran at the State Department for this administration. Ray, it's great to have you on the program. I'd like to talk to you about your writing and your book in just a moment. But curious, what do you think of what's transpired over the last several days, the back and forth between the White House and the senators on this letter?
Well, I think at the very least it highlights the fact that there's a lot of disquiet on the Hill about what the executive branch is doing in its negotiations. There's a difference between the executive branch and the Hill, between Republicans and the White House. And I think the president would be wise to try to bridge these gaps as opposed to exacerbate them, because ultimately, in practice, any deal negotiated with Iran has to be based on some sort of a domestic consensus, which at this point is not there.
One of the topics that you've written a book, in fact, on this, is Iran's approach to the world. And I'm curious if you could take us into that thinking here. As what do you think Iran's making of this back and forth? How do you think that's playing in Iran?
Well, I think for some within the Iranian political establishment, such as the supreme leader, they tend to have a very paranoid view of the United States. So they probably dismiss this as America playing good cop, bad cop, with John Kerry being the good cop and the senators being the bad cop, as a means of extracting leverage on Iran in the negotiations. So they essentially see this whole thing as a conspiracy, not as a genuine disagreement between various branches of government in the United States.
That said, one of the articles that you recently wrote is entitled "The Strategic Genius of Iran's Supreme Leader," and you say that he's very effective as far as negotiations, going in with a weaker hand than he comes out with. So as you continue to watch what's happening behind the scenes, and that is the bigger picture here, what is the deal that is made or is not made, and does Iran get the nuclear weapon? You know, what do you think of how Iran is playing this, and whether or not Iran will, quote unquote, win?
Well, the Iranian negotiators have been, and for the past decade, have been very disciplined and very determined. They have sought to have an agreement with sort of a relaxed broad lines and a certain expiration date that gives them the ability to legally proceed toward an industrial-sized nuclear program and infrastructure. And once they have that, in a position not that dissimilar to Japan, then they can dash to a bomb with limited risk of detection, much less retaliation. So this is a longer path to a weapon, but it's a more reliable and safer path. Because
you've worked with inside this administration, you speak Persian, you're an Iranian American. What can you tell us about how you feel the White House views Iran, and whether or not America in general has a good understanding of who exactly they're dealing with?
Well, I think the Secretary's comments today have to be taken, I mean, you take him at his word. The administration is trying to have a deal that, from its perspective, limits Iran's path to a bomb. There is some disagreement over the details and provisions of this prospective deal, and I don't think they can necessarily not be worked out. I think there are some negotiations that can happen between the White House and Congress where they both can essentially come to the same page. Not everybody's going to get what they want. So in that particular sense, I think they do want an arms control agreement. As far as how we understand Iran, it's a very opaque system. It's a very difficult system to penetrate. We don't have an embassy there. The Iranian system is particularly complicated with many centers of power and backroom dealings. I'm not sure if anybody really has a good grasp of it, but we do know that it is a leadership at the highest level that has a very lack understanding of how the United States functions and works and deals with each other.
It's important to keep that in mind, again, as we're continuing to watch any developments from the negotiations. Ray, it's nice to have you on the program. We look forward to having you back. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.